Hello, this is Sara.
And this is Rachel.
And I'm here to talk about my piece, The Birth of Venus, and then Rachel will take over with her piece. And The Birth of Venus was created by Sandro Botticelli, and it was inspired by the poem of Angelo Poliziano. It was commissioned by the Medici family.
So what type of Venus? You said
yes,
particular kind?
Yes, this particular type of Venus is called a modest Venus, and we've seen it before. It's been in other statues. She's covering both of her parts. In some statues, she's just covering her vagina, or she's just covering her breast, and this one she's covering both.
I see.
Yes.
Very modest.
And this piece has been termed visual poetry because it kind of breaks away from the Renaissance trend of
the realism.
Yeah, sticking to realism and to actually creating pieces that are very realistic, very anatomical, and this one actually is a lot more flowy. And just looking at some of the figures there, we have Zephyrus in the upper left-hand corner with
the guy that's kind of floating there.
Chloris, yes, blowing Venus, who's in the middle on a cockle shell. And on land, we find Pomora with a mantle just ready to cover up the nude Venus. And she's waiting on land on Venus's sacred island, Cyprus. Actually, Venus being nude right now is very out of character.
It's still pretty controversial.
Yeah, it's pretty controversial. Botticelli could have been charged with paganism and infidelity by the church
for
depicting a nude figure.
But at least he's trying to cover her up. Yeah. You can tell he's making an effort.
Yeah. A quote from Stokes, Maryland, and Collins from the book Art History says, Botticelli's style, clearly distinct from the earnest search many other artists pursued to comprehend humanity and the natural world through a rational and empirical order.
So he kind of took advantage of this being like a fictional painting and kind of like ran with that idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he didn't give any sort of attention to form. You can see that all of the figures are kind of floating. None of them are really very much grounded.
Right, I definitely noticed that. Mm-hmm. Especially her, like, standing on the shell. She's got an interesting stance there. She's
just about to tip over. It's a very windy piece. It's like the wind is kind of just helping everyone float up.
Yeah.
But even at the same time, the wind is only really affecting Pomora.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I was thinking that could really be compared to the piece I was looking at, which is the Nike or the Winged Victory of Samothrace, which is kind of the similar idea because it's another goddess who is being pretty windswept, but in this situation it has a very different feeling. The goddess I'm looking at is Nike, and she is the goddess of victory, and that's kind of the overall feel that this piece is trying to portray. The artist is actually unknown, but we do know it's from the Hellenistic period, which is around the 2nd century, and this was actually a monument that was in a temple complex. And it was supposed to be commemorating a naval battle, which is why she's actually carved atop of a stone ship. And basically, people really consider this to be a masterpiece of that period because of the incredible detail and how dynamic this girl is.
Just to point out some of the details, sort of like the drapery. And I know you mentioned the wings themselves being very detailed.
Yeah, the texture on the wings is actually pretty incredible if you look at them up close. And the drapery as well, the way that it is kind of plastered to her body, you can see, even though she's not naked, you can definitely see all the details there. And actually just the shape of her body as well and the stance she's in is really quite amazing and really gives you an emotional reaction to it, I feel. And there's an art historian, H.W. Jansen, that said that the Nike creates a deliberate relationship to the imaginary space around the goddess, which is suggested as metaphors of struggle, destiny, and divine help or grace. And that this kind of interplay between a statue and the space around it would actually only be seen in much later pieces, like a few thousand years later. So that's really, remarkable.
And the Renaissance is actually playing off art pieces from your time period.
Yeah, definitely, which is what's so interesting about your piece, is that it kind of chooses to break away from that.
Yeah. It does choose to break away from that. He broke free and created, like one person said, visual poetry.
Right. And then on the other hand, the Nike is very much about realistically portraying the body so that we can almost imagine a human being or ourselves being in that situation and overcoming her struggles.
Yeah. It feels almost like we are very much in her presence.
Right. It's presence is a good word.
Now, she's missing her heads and her arms. And I know we talked about what those could have potentially looked like.
Yeah, there's a lot of a lot of proposed ideas that people have that perhaps she was holding a horn and would have been like calling out or something like that. But a lot of people actually kind of appreciate the missing head because they think that it kind of helps give the idea that she is otherworldly and that she is a goddess. So we don't try to connect her to any particular human being.
Right. But still, there's that literal depiction and literal form of a human being, and the most, I guess, godly part of her is actually her wings. But the piece itself is quite huge.
It is.
Yes, it's several feet in the air, and the pedestal it's on is even a lot larger.
Yeah, and it's situated at the top of the Daru staircase in the Louvre, which is actually, it's a very dramatic placement, and they've put it there very deliberately, and it's something that attracts a lot of attention.
Okay.
So, like we said, this is a very interesting comparison between these two pieces, where yours, what you might think might be a little more realistic, it's actually...
Yeah, it's more whimsical, more... it's inspired by a poem, and it can almost inspire someone to do the same thing in writing a poem.
Right.
And so it's very non-realistic, it's very non-empirical, sort of like that, which was supposed to characterize the Renaissance era. Yeah. This is actually quite early in the Renaissance. It's made in 1486.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I guess that what we can take away from that is just that, art is art, and artists can do whatever they want. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and this was Sarah and Rachel talking about two goddesses.